afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Bradley, and on behalf of the Chrome Associates, really delighted to welcome you to our annual lifestyle event, where we deal with matters that are of importance to each and every one of us. And today I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Darren Green to you all. I think it is very appropriate that his surname is Green, because certainly in my opinion, he is a man for all seasons. I've known Darren for many, many years now, and I have yet to meet many other people who have as broad a range of accomplishments as he does. So, on the sports field, he played provincial sports at 3 sports. He got to the level of the national sevens rugby team before getting injured. From an academic point of view, he is a doctor with postgraduate study in neurology and masters in sports and exercise medicine. And on the cultural side, in the very first Idols in South Africa, he was one of the finalists. And to hear him, go and do his opera renditions are certainly awe-inspiring. Darren, we're delighted that you can join us today. And probably the most important accolade that I can give to you is that Darren and I went to the same school. Sad to say, he was there a few years after I was there. But being a fellow grey boy from Port Elizabeth, or Gqeberha, as it's now known, it's wonderful. But certainly Darren achieved a great deal more at school than I did. He was the matric of the year there, as well as the junior mayor in Port Elizabeth at the time. So Darren's going to share with us one of his passions, and that's about our personal wellness, and particularly in times of challenging times that we're currently having. So Darren, over to you.
Thank you very much. I trust and pray that I'm unmuted, because for every time one speaks on these Zoom calls against the Zoom button, if we had to give $1 to everyone we owed for that error, I think some people would really be doing quite well. So thanks for those kind words, and thanks for the opportunity to engage with such an incredibly diverse, but also such an interesting group of people. It's such an honor to speak about things that affect our wellness and our health on all fronts. And for me, obviously, it's something I feel very passionate about. So it's an absolute opportunity for us to get to know each other a bit better. And I'm sure that there'll be something you can learn from me and I from you during the session. And there's lots of exciting things to share. So when asked to talk specifically about a topic that I think would be relevant in your lives, especially as an investment into your own life, as part of this, the lifestyle and health wing of what you do every year, I thought, how much more important is it for us to look at dealing with change? Because we all know that it's been quite an incredible season, hasn't it, in dealing with change. So I decided to title this talk, Staying Dynamic in Times of Change. And you'll see that picture on the screen that I'm going to show you in a short while makes it very, very interesting in terms of how we often leave change to chance. So let's see if we can get my screen up and running, and we can go for gold. So we're staying dynamic in times of change, and often we leave dealing with change in our lives at different seasons and challenge levels to chance. And that's why I love that picture, because it's a good confrontation of, do we actually leave change to chance, or are we actually actively involved in the process of being a little bit better prepared? And can we actually prepare for change? And to what degree can our adaptability be conditioned and actually adapting on the fly? As a human species, we are incredibly well equipped in dealing with change when it comes to the environment, when it comes to challenges that threaten your survival. When it comes to creativity, problem solving, and innovation, however, there seems to be something lacking in some of us, and that some people have magically that helps them endure adversity and get to levels of incredible success in whatever they're doing. So let's take a look and take a trip down memory lane as we look at a few of the important aspects associated with change. Are we moving? Let's go. Just there we go. So Rumi said, yesterday I was clever, today I wanted to change the world, but today I'm so wise that I am changing myself. So I find that incredible because change often starts with us. And I'm going to play something for you straight after this. And I don't think there's any sound or audio, but I want you to just take a look at what you're going to see, and then we'll reconnect straight after this. What you're seeing is COVID times, and you're seeing a grandfather arrive after 5 months of not seeing his grandson and deciding that he can't anymore during a very fearful time where we weren't sure about touching, getting close to each other, introducing the virus, etc. That's what you're seeing there is my then 11-year-old son hugging his grandfather through a sheet held up by my wife and his sister. And what you're actually witnessing over there is the effect that so many of us endured during this time. So if I come back to that, I just want to say there's a context that needs to be definitely be focused on here. That is, in a time of adversity and change and challenge, what were the default settings in all of us? All of us confronted with numerous, challenges and adverse circumstances. In this case, it had been 5 months since a granddad had seen his grandchild and decided no more, despite the uncertainty of introducing a virus that could kill him at the time. And, all the fear and anxiety around spreading the virus, contracting the virus, etc. We knew so little, and it was changing so rapidly. Every month there was a different theory on how long a virus can stay on a surface, which surfaces handle the COVID virus for how long. And I was bombarded in the media space as well in terms of health and wellness with those fearful questions, and often confronted with people that went into tremendous states of panic. But I showed that video specifically because it unites us all. It unites us all because we share the same structural system where we come from in terms of a sense of community and family. And that's one thing that no matter what your standing in life is or your class, we all experience emotion that you witness there. And that's where I hope to trigger some thought in this. So I'm going to chat quickly about the landscape currently in terms of wellness and health. We're going to look at the changing face of wellness as we move into the millennial era, and then understanding the drivers that actually drive brain performance. And in that, then move to more of a practical action plans as to what you can actually do to help facilitate you becoming more resilient, etc. But from a neuro wellness perspective, of course. So where we are currently, people have mental health issues and burnout. I have a little chuckle to myself because every year when it gets to November, it's like everyone is like crawling towards the finish line with their nails scraping the driveway as they move towards the end of the year. And if you think about it, we are often confronted with such interesting differences between the Gen Zs, our millennial culture, the missed generation in between, and then obviously those that were born before 1970. So it's quite interesting when we look at communication strategies and the effect that COVID has had in that field specifically as well. If you think about a deaf person, how many of you have thought about the effect COVID had on people that lip read? And the wearing of masks, for example, and how that relates to the ability to read emotion, nonverbal cues, and to communicate and understand for someone that's deaf. Have you ever thought about the phenomena of being single during the time that we've just come through, where people really became anxious? How am I going to meet someone? How am I going to date someone? How am I going to move forward in my life? So for some people, it was great. And we've also seen the effect from a psychological and psychiatric point of view, where, for example, things like marriages are either strengthened tremendously, and families, in view of time that had to be spent together in closed confinement with people that you love, or eventually really not used to spending that kind of intense time together, and how that then played out into the different relationships between siblings, between partners, etc. So the landscape's been quite interesting in that space. And then the other thing I needed to mention specifically was when we look at 2D versus 3D strategies, when it comes to effective communication, we often use obviously the facial expression, the tone, the voice, the eyes speak, the hands speak while we engage, and etc. But during COVID, there was a certain degree of hiding behind a mask that has affected our children, particularly between the ages of 3 and 12, to a large degree, where some of them still only feel safe behind a mask, and where they struggle to read the room. Now, when I say read the room, I'm referring particularly in your ability to actually pick up on the non-verbal cues as to whether, simple example, you're moving into someone's space, bubble, and you're moving too close and they're uncomfortable. You can't pick up their irritation or their discomfort, and you carry on with your behavioral style and your communication style. So those finer nuances are affecting communication strategies in our children at school. And with that comes the screen time and the tech, where tech has wonderful uses in education to a large degree, and they have opportunities that some of us never had growing up. With that comes obviously the fact that they learn to communicate in two-dimensional fashion with emojis and faces to express emotion rather than their actual expression. So interesting to look at digital innovation and the effect that has had in terms of our wellness and sense of well-being at the moment. So we'll start off with the first poll. So enough from me. Let's get you involved in the session and let's get you voting. I want you to have a look at that lady and then answer the following 2 questions. Let's have a look at this poll. Are you ready to vote? There we go. Would you say that the lady depicted here is well? Yes or no? You've got a few seconds to answer. And the second question is, would you say that she has quality of life? And let's see how you all feel about that. Is she well? And does she have quality of life? Give you a few seconds and let's see what you said. The results say 70% said no, this lady's not well, and 57%, however, did think that she has quality of life. All right, the next one will go quicker. So let's move on. Interesting to note that, because what people use are filters that differentiate wellness and quality of life. How do you define wellness? How do you define quality of life? You look at this lady's face, for example, and you think, oh my word, she's had a bit of a gravel road experience. She's had a rough ride, and you think, look at those. If I told you she was 40, what would you think then? You'd definitely think that, that she's had a bit of a hard life. But I asked some people the question about their quality of life, and they think she has great quality of life. She has time to sit down and enjoy a ciggy. She has time, obviously, as well, to put on her best jewelry and makeup as best she can. And that creates for some people a sense that she actually doesn't have too bad a quality of life. All right, so we're moving on. Finally, there we go. What you're seeing there is the first exercise bicycle that we've got on the right-hand side, and the power plate version from 1913 on the left, where obviously we'd have vibrating belts around your abdomen region in an attempt to mobilize the fat tissue and to help you actually lose weight in centimeters around the waist. How health and wellness has moved on since then to a place now when we look at the landscape, according to the Global Wellness Report, where South Africa placed last in the G20 nations of the world because of the impact of obesity, with a major cost to our country. The Global Wellness Index, as we refer to it, looks specifically at things like life expectancy, alcohol use, depression, and diabetes. And that's where we as a nation, unfortunately, didn't fare too well. and basically were placed last in those top 20 G20 nations. So when it comes to defining wellness, it's not just about the absence of disease. If we look at the path of wellness and how people have described it over years, the roots in the East and spiritual theories on wellness involve basically, if your life isn't in accordance with your maker, you would die a terrible death. You would die a premature death due to your line with your higher being not being in order, and you having, so to say, a poor connection to your higher order or spiritual connection. We then moved on to the physical theories of wellness, where people wanted power, land. They wanted to claim land and authority. And if you look at the Roman Empire, the Romans and the Greeks, they had to design warfare weapons of mass destruction to kill quickly and to claim, obviously, land and move on. But how did they design the weapons? How did they decide to use a battle axe, a shield? How did we get to all those things? But if you look at the techniques of what was applied, people started wanting to know what's going on inside the body. They'd look inside the neck and see, oh, that's where you need to actually, place the knife, for example, with a thick hose pipe to let someone die quicker, to win the war, to move on. So the designing of weaponry in terms of warfare and all that were based on some of these theories, where the greed of man for power and land drove that inquisitive nature. And the Romans and Greeks then started to cut open the human body, looking at things like the brain connected to a thick cord called the spinal cord. Look at the heart, which looked like a ball in the middle of the chest, and thick pipes coming from it, innovating and basically supplying blood to the entire body in terms of the arms, the legs, the fingers, etc. And so the physical theories of wellness became very popular of that era, and we moved into a place where people very focused on black rot of the lung, looking specifically at lesions of the lung, looking at the nervous system where you control, for example, motor function of the limbs and hands, etc., etc. So wonderful, wonderful journey and research that came through from that time. So where does that leave us now, and where are we? We still have people that are so focused on wellness in terms of pharma and medicine and the absence of disease, that they still see health only as physical health. But we've progressed to a modern theory which hopefully will affect this youngster. And I'm sure if you look at this, it also brings back some memories. If you were born in 2020, it's like everything at that level. Look at that, the sprinklers, the outlet pipes, everything she's doing, the lights in the garden. It's just like, put your hand there and rub them together. Everyone thinks that's what they were exposed to for the first 2 years of their lives. So we look now in modern times basically at this, which is the biopsychosocial model of wellness, where the bio refers to your biology and your meat box, the social, your social relationships, and your psychology, the way you view the world and your thinking processes around your health, wellness, and interactions. And what we found now is that we can't separate these three at all. They are so interwoven that the one affects the other, A simple example of this would be, let's say you're going through a relationship breakup or a divorce. What happens to you physically? Well, firstly, you're disturbed, you're not sleeping, you're anxious at nighttime. You don't eat properly, or you eat too much, for example. You then struggle to fall asleep, which lowers your immunity. You end up with cold sores. If you're worrying a lot about the finances and the lawyers, etc., what happens is you start developing pain in your abdomen. That's the effect of a stress ulcer due to chronic secretion of acid in the stomach, for example. And over time, you'll become exhausted and tired, but you end up bleeding in your stools from a bleeding ulcer, and it lowers your iron levels. And the iron carries oxygen molecules, obviously, on hemoglobin in the blood. And that's where you'd end up being exhausted, tired, and absolutely flatlined. That's an example of how we can't separate the social, the biological, and the psychological. Think of other circumstances in your life when physically you feel unwell due to so many other things, the loss, the grief of losing someone, for example, as well. Right, let's do this next impact. I just want to have a quick look at this poll. Let's see if you can answer these questions quickly. The effect of lockdown on your physical health, has it been positive or negative? Has your physical health improved after the era that we've been through? It's very important for us to just take stock of that. So first question, on your physical health, as the effect of what we've been through in terms of working away from work, working from home, and the lockdown period itself, has it been positive or negative? And then on your mental health is the second question, the effect of lockdown on your mental health. And the last question is the effect on your social life and relationships. So physical health, positive or negative? Did you get better or worse? Mental health, is it more negative or positive? And then the last one, your impact on your social life and relationships. Was it dramatic and severe, or was it mild? And you can submit those answers, and let's have a look and see what those answers are. I see old Charles Howard says the poll's not working for him as well. Wonder if there isn't something going on Zoom. Anyway, let's have a look. The effect of lockdown on physical health is a 50-50 split over there, and pretty much the same for mental health. And then very mild effect. So your relationships, for a lot of people, it didn't really affect them. Your close friends that were your friends before lockdown and before COVID are still your close friends. Some people were affected, obviously, and some weren't. But if you look at those, most people actually came through it all right. And that also speaks of where you were at in terms of your coping mechanisms and skills and how you've come out of that 2-year period. But we'll talk about that, and I'll give you a chance for questions hopefully soon as well. All right, let's move on. So when we look specifically at that, big memories, blast from the past, who remembers those? I'm sure you remember some of these. We used to watch them attentively every day and watch the numbers go up and down, and obviously allow that to guide us in terms of whether we were winning or not. Everyone became an expert on vocabulary. If you look at that little bubble over there, PPE, Zoom, we've got contact tracing, social distancing, face masks, essential, non-essential business. And everyone became an expert at exercise when you weren't allowed out to exercise. Who remembers that? When you were told you can't go outside and ride and take a run or take a swim, then suddenly the entire nation were all gym babies and keen on exercising. But nevertheless, we are where we are now, and we're interesting as a species. The impact on, as you all know, has had a dramatic effect on health, education, the economy, tourism, and with that also family life, communities as a whole. The mental health burden of COVID is something that we're still seeing daily in practice, and something that we're working very hard on dealing with and actually addressing. When we look at that, I want you to give me one word when you look at that picture. One word. Think of a word. Put it down. Can you see it on the comment line or not? I just wanted to ask you if you can see anything on the comment line, on the chat. The chat's just nice. Okay. Anyway, the difference here is the person on the left and right are the same people, but same person. But what you have is a filter that goes through your brain in terms of marginalizing and categorizing people based on your perceptions. When you look at that, obviously, some of you would meet that guy in the queue at Pick and Pay and wonder whether you'd want to have a conversation. When I put that on the screen, what emotion does it evoke in you when I put that on the screen? Think of a word. Some people say class. Some people say power. Some people think success. What do you think when you see that? And that one, some interesting responses to that one. I've had some, oh no, not me. I've had some other people, obviously, being very, very, very nostalgic. They thought of some stage and phase of their life before kids. Another one. Think of that picture. We're looking specifically at your visual and emotional response and your perceptual filters at the moment. Put that on the, there we go. That's another picture. What emotion does the picture on the extreme left evoke in you? The one in the middle and the one on the right. become aware of your own filters at the moment. And with the whole topic of perception, remembering too that perception and how you see yourself is not the same as how other people might see you. So when it comes to Maslow's triangle of basic needs, moving up to the top of that triangle of self-actualization, how you see yourself might not be the same as other people see you, and you need to marry the two and get a closer look at those. But anyway, when we move and look at performance, because this is about how you position yourself and how you look after your health in general. And I'm showing you the multiple facets of looking after your health that lead to you performing well and doing well in your life in all facets, not just performance at work, but also in relationships, in family life, communities, etc. Perception and influence. The perceptions are formed by past experience. They're formed by your environment, the company you keep, whether the people you spend time with are like-minded or not. And the third point on the list there is quite an important one on how you define success and whether success trumps significance in your life. So the question would be, if I asked you right now to name 2 people that you think are highly successful, who are the people that will come to mind? Go for it. Name 2 people quickly. Just think of 2 people that are highly successful. And here I normally get some Elon Musks, and I get some Steve Jobs, and I get so many people that have really reached levels of success. Some sportsmen that are Usain Bolt, for example, and so many different people focus on different parts of society and interests. But if I had to ask you exactly the same question and ask you, in your life, who are name 2 people that you think are the most significant, people that have been significant in your life? How would you answer that question, and who would those people be? Because success and significance are not the same thing. Success refers to you and what you've achieved and what you've done, and your levels of success in terms of excellence. But significance is how you relate to others and how your influence with your success sometimes can actually do things that affect others. It's outward living versus inward living. And that's quite interesting, because as we go through the normal phases of psychological development in our lives, we storming and norming through the 20s, we acquire all sorts of relationships, friendships. Then we start working on our skill set and studying for a few years. Then we work at honing those skills, and we get into a position where we're relatively good at what we do. Then suddenly at the age of 45 or 40, you start wondering, but okay, where can I make a difference in the world? And when you hit 60, it's like, what legacy am I leaving behind? Where can I make it count? And that's where people then move through the pathway of success to significance. How much more meaningful, isn't it, if we can become mindful of doing significant things earlier on in our careers and not waiting until we necessarily are fat cats and very successful before doing significant things? Because you could be significant without being successful. So think about that for a while. And then obviously what drives you is either intrinsic or extrinsic, or a combination of the two. And some people thrive in an environment where it's competition and where they absolutely love the hype of having people around them. What COVID has taught us coming out of that is that intrinsic motivation is something that often is required when you're working from home and you don't have the energy in the room around a boardroom table of colleagues bouncing ideas off you and you bouncing ideas off them. Things can change, certainly. So that's just to remind you, people that are successful and significant, you might recognize some of the folk in on those pictures. I'm sure you do. And there's always someone in the room that recognizes Johnny Depp. For some other reason, there's always someone that recognizes Johnny. Rainer Banner, Pavarotti, Steve Jobs. All right. So if there's one thing you need to focus on and just hear me out with for today in terms of you understanding the fullness of your wellness profile, but also understanding what drives performance and you achieving the best possible levels you can, not only in just surviving, but thriving and moving into a place of really top-notch achievement and functioning. It's this. This is a model that was designed by an international company called Neurozone Global. I assist sometimes as a facilitator or brain coach because of my background in neurology to explain these concepts to many corporates and executives who are looking at strategy in their business, etc. as well, but also how we look after ourselves so that we can actually live long enough to actually mean something to the people that we employ or work with. So if you look at that, you'll see a whole lot of green circles on the left, blue circles at the top, orange circles on the right. So what we've done here, they've divided the drivers that drive performance into foundational or basic things. And that you can see in the green are exercise, nutrition, the sleep-wake cycles, that's sleep, sleep, sleep. And then, of course, silencing the mind, which is mindfulness and learning that discipline of allowing thoughts to move past you and not responding to every thought, because you choose to be in a relaxed physiological state and choose to focus on one thing and do it well, even although the world is chaotic around you. That's silencing the mind and mindfulness. The other three, exercise. Just to give you a quick rundown, in terms of exercise at the moment in the world, important to remember, a lot of evidence for HIIT. And for those of you that don't know what HIIT is, it's high intensity interval training, where you get your heart rate up to maximum heart rate within under a minute, a few seconds, 30 seconds, and you keep it there for a minute, and then you relax again, and you allow the heart rate to return to normal. That's high intensity interval training. Why that's important for those that didn't know is that it actually releases a chemical in the brain that facilitates the growth of new brain cells, even when you're 80, even when you're 70, even when you're 60. It's called brain-derived growth factor, or BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that type of exercise specifically is the one that releases that hormone in the brain and helps you continuously make new cells that can be utilized. When we look specifically at other forms of exercise like cardio and strength training, important to know that after the age of 40, your testosterone levels definitely drop considerably, and you struggle to maintain your muscle mass and retain that strength that you had in terms of resistance training. Thus, a good doctor or a good trainer would say to you, remember to keep doing exercises above the shoulder as you get older, and a little bit of resistance, whether that's your own body resistance or a little bit of elastic bands, or going to the gym and actually doing some weights. Different story. You can pick your grandkids up and do exactly the same. So I think that's quite important, and I think that we could learn a lot in terms of improving that. And then when we look at other things like nutrition, a lot of discussion around things like ketogenic diets, a lot of Banting diets. We've been through all that. Intermittent fasting is the big buzzword now. And the interesting part of what you need to know from evidence-based medicine is that we didn't know that we could utilize an alternate source of fuel and energy besides glucose until about 13 years ago, when we discovered that ketone bodies, which are formed when you break down other molecules, not just carbs, but things like protein, for example, as well, the absence of circulating sugar in the blood, ketone bodies fuel the brain cells just as effectively as glucose does, without the risk, obviously, of glucose being pro-inflammatory over a long period of time in excessive amounts. So you can imagine how many people absolutely were blown away with the story of ketogenic diets and then intermittent fasting as well. And that's why it's become so popular now for people doing a 16-hour fast. That means you eat your last meal at 6 at night, an early supper. You don't have a late night snacks, and you specifically don't go and look at getting anything with sugar in it until you go to bed at night. So you have an early supper, and the next morning you can have black coffee without sugar or milk, because both of those contain glucose, which switches on the different metabolic pathway. And most people then will have coffee in the morning without sugar and milk, and then eat lunch, and then have lunch as they normally would, and supper as they normally would, but just not eating after that. So that's how intermittent fasting works for those that wanted a little crash course in that. But sleep is just as important. One of the single most important factors that research has revealed is that bedtime consistency plays a major role in resilience and resilience training. Your ability to have mental resilience, physical resilience, and to actually bounce back and come up with creative solutions and problem solving, interventions, is very dependent on sleep. And why that is, sleep is not there just to help your body repair itself. Sleep is there to order things within the brain in terms of how we move things from long-term to short-term memory, how we take out files for the next day's discussion. If you read the agenda, what your brain actually does, it takes out that topical information that you've stored in long-term memory, brings it out, puts it on the table for tomorrow's meeting for you to have quicker and immediate access to it. That's only if you've read the agenda, and your brain can prime that. It does so while you rest and while you sleep. Your brain actually loves to calculate and know what's coming. It loves routine. It calculates how much energy to expend per task that it knows is coming up. So when you introduce suddenly a task that it wasn't planned for the day, your brain doesn't like it. It loves knowing how much energy it can ascribe to different things, and it loves routine. Sorry for the people out there that don't like routine, but routine is beneficial when it comes to the neuro-wellness profile. All right, and then those three blue ones over there I'm going to speak to just now when I look at the social brain: value tagging, goal-directedness, and collective creativity, where the creativity of the group always trumps the creativity of the individual. How that group is comprised is also very important in terms of having the balance of ages, having the balance of gender, having the balance of background and experience. It enables you and empowers you to come up with more creative solutions if you work on that. And then we'll move on to the higher order drivers of performance, how you become intellectually stimulated and plug into a zone of becoming a brilliant innovator and problem solver. And we'll get to that. All right. So I hope you've enjoyed that little outline of just understanding the different components of wellness. So the foundational drivers: sleeping, drinking water, exercise, and silencing the mind. Let's not forget those. And we move to the emotional brain, or the orange ones that I mentioned there. We're going to do poll 3, and let's do that quickly. Let's have it. Poll 3. Be honest in your polls. Those of you that can vote. Let's see. I see Richard Branson there earlier on. Thanks, Arian. Right, your poll. Let's see. Do you feel emotionally and physically safe in your workplace? Yes or no? Do you feel that what you do is significant? Do you see yourself working in the same place in 5 years from now? Now, given that's an age-dependent thing for some of you, but for some of you not. But just interesting. Don't worry, no one can see who's voting and who's answering what. So you can be honest. Okay, let's go. Let's see what that shows. A few seconds. And we're going to look at this now and look at the role that this plays in you reaching the potential that you hope to achieve. There we go. So 95% of people feel safe. They don't feel threatened, because there's a thing called physical safety. There's physical safety, obviously, and then you also have emotional safety and trust. So that's another component to think of. Do you feel that what you do is significant? And yes or no? Yes, that's a sense of meaning and purpose. 90% of you out there feel that what you do is significant and that it makes a difference in the world. I see myself working in the same place in 5 years' time. Well, 80-20 there, 20%, a fifth of you, 1 in 5 said probably not. That could be age-related. One would have to understand the profile of everyone that filled in the questionnaire. Great, so let's have a look at this quickly. The emotional drivers and the social brain. Now, what you need to know about this is that we move backwards, forwards. We need to know the art of value tagging. Now, value tagging is something interesting. There's a structure in the brain called the amygdala, which is Greek. If there are any Greeks out there, amygdala, and it refers to an almond, a nut, the almond. And the amygdala is responsible for value tagging. That's its job. And what it does is, for every single situation you get into in life, any circumstance, getting to a stop street, getting out of the car and going to the bathroom, going into a bar for a drink, you will be confronted with a value that's ascribed to that situation. And that value is a value that either makes you feel comfortable and move towards something, or to move away from something. Someone might speak to you about a topic or an issue, wanting to test the waters and see if you're interested in getting on board with a new project of theirs. And as they open their mouth and they start talking, you feel, but I'm not sure I want to go down this route with this person. And you actually don't know exactly why you're saying that, because nothing they've said words-wise has given you a reason not to want to do anything. But there are other things involved where the value tagging makes you feel either threatens your survival, or whether your filters of perception that I mentioned earlier on in the brain are telling you warning lights, warning lights. So when you're at a tea party or a getting together for a dinner party or braai with a big group of people, you might arrive and feel, but I'm not sure I belong here. Have you ever had that? Have you ever walked into an event or a function where you feel, I don't know if this is my crowd. I don't know if I actually fit in. And that specifically is where the sense of belonging occurs that's ascribed to value tagging. And that's why we thrive and we start resonating with a different form of problem-solving ability and success when you surround yourself with people that are like-minded, because you feel like you belong, you feel, and you don't feel threatened, you feel safe in that zone, and that allows you to move forward in terms of your brain performance and in terms of your success. So that structure in the brain asks 4 questions. It asks, do I feel safe? And that's why I asked the question in the poll. Do I belong? Can I make a significant contribution or not? And do the people that I work with every day, on the phone, in person, do they make me feel like they actually appreciate or value what I say? Because if they don't, you're not going to hang around very long and you're not going to be happy in your workplace. If you're in a relationship where the person in your relationship, that could be your life partner, your wife, your husband, if that relationship and the interaction in that relationship constantly is one where you don't feel that your suggestions are taken seriously, appreciated, or even considered, very hard to stay plugged into a circumstance or a relationship like that. And then the last one there, the 4th thing that the amygdala does in terms of value tagging is a sense of identity. Do you align with the system you serve and the value systems that surround you? When we get to those higher order drivers of goal directedness, we have to recognize that setting goals in itself changes the wiring of the brain. It creates pathways in the brain that are constructive, getting you to a place of better focus and productivity, even if you don't achieve the goal fully. Just putting it down in a sequence or structure and actually making it a structured agenda point or a directed action on paper has an effect on the structural impact of the proteins in the brain. For those that didn't know that. When it comes to collective creativity, I mentioned, I was privileged enough to be the Chief Medical Officer of the British Irish Lions tour at the height and peak of the 3rd wave of COVID in our country, in Gauteng. We navigated this tour to try and keep professional rugby and SA rugby alive at that time. We were at risk of closing the doors of rugby as a professional sport in this country because obviously over having no rugby in the country, no broadcast rights, no financial income, no tournaments, no development, none of that happened for a period of 2 years. Yet we were so fearful of not having beds to treat people. If I have a rugby match and someone fractures their neck, I need to have a guaranteed trauma bed available so that player, I take Yeben Etzebeth for a neck fracture to the hospital, that we can reduce the fracture immediately and alleviate pressure on the spinal cord. The rugby match couldn't start unless I had beds available. I had to pull resources and people together from all kinds of angles to help us achieve a common goal, which made a difference to many livelihoods and many people in this country. And it was an incredible experience. But in doing that, doing it with a group of highly skilled people that are all experts in their field and people that all contributed to coming up with creative solutions. All right, so reminding you, foundational drivers, the emotional drivers, the value tagging, being goal-directed, setting the goals, the collectivity, creativity of the group, and then the higher order drivers. There you see a picture of my son, Daniel, who's 13 years old, sitting with his granddad. And when you look at that, you wonder how much of wisdom knowledge, understanding is actually transferred from, from people that are more experienced. For you in your place of influence as well, how much is to get to a place of learning, abstraction, and to actually pull from that pool of knowledge and learn as much as you possibly can. You need obviously time, you need focus, you need the right energy. So in order to move into this place, you can't get to this place of learning and abstraction and problem solving if the basics are not in place. What do I mean? If my son on the left-hand side there hadn't slept because he was playing Minecraft on his TV game console for 8 hours and slept 2 hours, he can't learn. He's not in a position to actually take in, drink it, be aware, alert, and to actually learn from other people every day. So if the basics are not in place, if you're not eating properly, if you're not sleeping, if you aren't exercising to maintain your frame in some way that you can stay mobile, you can actually get to people, and that you can fend off the challenges of health that one actually has on a day-to-day basis, you're not going to get to that thriving place. And it's important to realize that, because it comes at a cost. A simple way of remembering it for you is that we all need to take more pictures, and that is problem solving, innovation, and creativity. All right, let's do poll 4 quickly. Are you ready? What can I do to prepare myself in dealing with trials, tribulations, and change? The question is, do you love routine? Yes or no? You yourself, do you or don't you? Do you handle change well? If I had to ask your closest friends, your lover, your partner, your children, do you handle change well? What would they say? Yes or no? And then the third question, do you consider yourself competent with digital technology? How savvy are you in terms of tech? Yes or no? And then, do you prefer online meetings or face-to-face sessions? Let's submit that. Let's get an answer. Right, have we got an answer? Here we go. Let's see. Do you love routine? 70% say yes, 30% no. Wow, okay. You handle change well. Almost 70% say yes, they do, but there's a 33% that say no. That like to be a little bit more fixed in their ways, and also necessarily like comfort zones, that don't like predictability. But it's not all negative, guys. Just please remember that. You consider yourself competent with digital tech. Yo, 80%, well done. And then we're looking at online meetings versus face-to-face. So yeah, so there's still a little bit more of you that prefer in-person meetings. A lot to be said. And in an era where time is an issue, we must think of it. So how do we adapt? How do we become better prepared for survival? How do we ensure survival? And how do we move it to a place of higher order drivers by sorting out the basics and then moving up that hierarchy of needs? Let's take a look at what you can do practically. This is so beautiful. I love this quote. It says, I saw the angel in marble and carved until I set him free. That's Michelangelo. And I always look at that and think, I hope I can be that kind of parent with my children. And that's what we strive towards. That's very special. All right, so what are your default settings when confronted with difficult times? Is that I'm not good with change. I'm not sure I have all the tools. Do any of these sound familiar to you? Any of these default settings? Others come before me. Exercise takes my energy, man. It makes me so tired. Exercise actually energizes you because you get the blood flowing, more oxygen to the muscles, to the brain once you start. If you want something done, do it yourself. How many of you struggle with that one? Bit of delegation and so on. What is your default setting when confronted with a challenge? And that's what that's all about. So this is important to remember. The puppeteer and its strings. Please remember that we can't modify and change behavior if we don't change the belief system or the thought. If you look at this triangle on the screen, the base of the triangle is what you think. The next level is what you say. What you think becomes what you say, becomes what you do, and what you do and your actions lead to how you perceived. Not so? And that is important because when you look at the puppeteer and the strings, you can move the direction of arms in a specific direction by moving a certain string. But if you need to change the entire movement and move in a different direction, you might have to cut that string and reattach it at a different place on the body of the puppet. And that's the visual that I want you to keep in mind when we sometimes keep, batting our heads against the wall with change, struggling to break through and move in a different direction, get yourself going. Sometimes you need to cut the thought process and the belief system, and it needs to be reattached. All right. I don't think there's any sound there, Andrew.
No, Darren.
I'm going to skip that. What that video is about, just for those of you that were watching, that video is about specifically someone with Down syndrome that has the physical features of Down syndrome. And he speaks about people looking at him and staring, how they think you're different. And, he dramatically describes the feeling of being different, being stared at, and being, glared at most of the time. And how the video ends is by this person saying, "I love it." What you totally don't expect at the end of this video is he says, "I love it." And what the ad is actually about is about the Paralympics, for those of you that don't know. So if you do have time, and you have time to go and look at it, that's it. It's the Special Olympics in Ireland. And that's one of the star players. So it was actually quite special in the sense that what you think and perceive people are going to do and say is often not what they're going to do and say, and your assumption is incorrect. But it's a matter of perception and perspective. So when it comes to change and challenge, my friends, I think we finish off with this. Dialectical mindset has become something that we need to look at. If you've heard the word before, say "I" and raise your hand. If you haven't, here's what it is. Dialectical mindset is when you can look at a concept or an issue or a problem where two opposing ideas can both be correct at the same time. Where, for example, looking at it from one angle reveals one perception and answer, but then looking at it from a different angle reveals a different answer. Like the picture on the screen, how many of you can see the word good? And how many of you see the word evil? Because if you look at that on the screen, different perceptions, the G of the good is there. There's the O and the D. But the evil, if you're looking at the white part, there's the E, the V, the I, and the L. So good and evil are coexisting here. And who's right? The dialectical mindset teaches you that even although you might differ and have a challenge on how to solve something, please be aware that there are different ways of looking at it. To get out of the crisis, the challenge, sometimes you need to step out of the one-track way of looking at something and reverse perspective. Fix the foundational drivers to make you resilient. We've spoken about that. Don't underestimate the power of sleep and what you put into your pie hole. I love calling the mouth the pie hole, because what goes in affects what comes out of this nut and your brain. So don't forget that. And then when we look at excuses we make to deal with change and to adapt, we often say we're too old, we're too young. It's not in my nature. It's not my generation. I don't have the time or the skills. But learning the skills, taking the time will shorten a lot of the time that you actually waste on certain things. It wasn't my choice. Why should I have to compensate for someone else's decisions? And one of the things we're really stuck in is actually making a decision, setting a goal, and moving forward. Enough, the past. When are we going to go back to the old normal? How many times haven't you heard that one? The new normal is the new normal. That's what it is. There's a time when you've got to write things off and move on. This has been one of the most powerful tools for me in terms of dealing with change, dealing with challenge in my life. I want to encourage you at any level of the organizations you serve to keep what's called a change biography. And that refers to you keeping a diary of circumstances, challenges, and things that you thought you'd never get past or through, but in fact did and made it past them. So I want to encourage you to really, really jot them down, because when you get into a dark pit of despair and you don't see a way out, you look back on your track record and see, oh my word, it's not the first time I felt like this. And that was actually a positive memory of something that happened where I didn't see the wood from the trees and I managed to get through. So I hope that is an encouragement to some of you. During tough times, there's often a constant. A lot of people turn to their faith, their religion, journaling, a gratitude diary. And I mentioned mindfulness earlier on. The reason is that when everything's changing and there's nothing constant around you, the things that are solid, that don't change, makes you feel a sense of being rooted. And that is what leads to you actually performing and going past the anxiety, the fear, and surviving into the thriving mindset. So remember that there is definitely a role for that. And then certainly one that I think all of us can take heed of in view of the stress and mental health issues that we are facing is set up a support team around you before you need it and before you get there. Who do you call at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep and your heart is racing at 140 beats per minute because you're anxious about a deal going through or not going through, and there's something bothering you that really is affecting your health to such a degree that you can't actually switch off? Who do you debrief with after you've received terrible news, and how do you deal with that? So don't underestimate the importance of a support team. And with resilience and tenacity, the things that have been proven from research, surround yourself with like-minded people. Optimism helps. I call them the people that suck you dry, like a petrol pumpy. They empty your petrol. Limit the time, and whether it's family or not family, you need to put boundaries in place to limit your time with people that suck you dry and empty your petrol tank. So structure your life in a way where you spend time with people that build you up and that aren't as draining, and look at arranging your time and managing your time effectively around that issue. I said making a meaningful contribution at work. If you haven't been doing that to people that serve you and help you, think about how you could get so much more from them and a cohesion from them if you actually gave them an ear and let them feel that what they're actually coming forward with is significant and you are grateful for it. Instead of saying, stick to your pay grade, that's a little bit above your pay grade. Think about that. And then the other thing is bedtime consistency, which I mentioned earlier on in terms of resilience. So there we go. I think those are some of the practical things that I need to mention. And if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And I think I've said enough. I wish I could see you in person, all of you right now. But anyway, that's that. Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Yanda.
Thanks very much, Darren. Much appreciated. Do you want to just exit the presentation? That'll be great. Thank you. Thanks very much for that. I think the first thing I'm going to journal is the challenges that we had with technology today, and how we got through that. So thanks very much for soldiering on through that. And yeah, certainly an insight for me was your high intensity interval training. So as I'm getting older and the grey matter is disappearing, if that is a very simple way for us to keep our brains developing and growing and maintaining the grey matter that we have, it seems a very simple and effective way of doing it. So what you're saying is not just exercise, but short, high intensity bits of exercise.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Are there any questions for Darren before we finish off? If there are any, you can put them in the questions box, and then we'll address that. But while I'm waiting for that, from my side, Darren, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time and the insights that you provided for us. I think the one thing I didn't mention in my introduction was the medical role that you play at a number of events. I know some of the people on the call have just done the Wines to Wales, where you were chief medical officer, and also the EPIC, and so many of these events where you add and provide your expertise and support for people, which is greatly appreciated.
No, thanks for that.
It doesn't seem like there are any questions, so take it from me to finish off the session. Thanks to each and every one of you for attending. I hope that you got some benefit out of it, got some insights on where you can perhaps make some enhancements to your life and assist you in that change process, which is something I found interesting. Most people felt that they didn't have a challenge with change, where in reality, it's something that I think we all struggle with to some extent. And so some of these tools can assist us. So let's see. Thanks very much for that final comment, Wendy. I'll close off now. Thanks very much, Darren. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.